Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks for joining today. Our final webinar of this month and a half long series around all things DevOps and security. So super happy to have many of you who have been here from the very first webinar up until today, which is to discuss the final topic on the series around achieving regulatory and security compliance across the development process. So before, again, my name is Leila. I'll be taking care of the community today. The beginning and the end of this webinar, I'll be taking the questions at the end of this session. So if you have anything that comes to your mind, please just use the Q&A button on the bottom of the Zoom webinar, and we'll address those at the very end. We'll keep 5 to 10 minutes to discuss all of that. And I'll just get us started with a little just a little intro of our co-founder and CEO, Laurent, who's going to be presenting today's topic. So Laurent is the co-founder and CEO of Strong Network. We are a Swiss-based company that developed a platform which empowers developers to work from anywhere while keeping the organization's data and assets secure. We'll talk about the technology behind it, but essentially, and this is what we talked about over these last sessions, it's really around container technology. And this is a solution that helps the organizations reduce IT costs, automate DevOps, protect against external and internal threats, and provide real-time process governance metrics, which is what we'll discuss today. And you'll realize that everything I just mentioned is overall some of the topics that we covered in the series. So I'll invite you to go back and rewatch those. Obviously, we'll send you the links to the recording of today, and you can always access the other recordings after the session. Laurent, maybe just a quick glance at the series here that Laurent is sharing. We started from securing virtual laptops, moving over to DevSecOps automation, DAST and VDI alternatives, and today is our final session around regulatory and security compliance across the development process. If also you have any questions, as I said, please ask them in the Q&A section. And I think we're pretty good. There's no other session for me to introduce you for next week because this is the final one, but we'll keep you posted on the next series, which will be coming up soon enough. If you have any feedback overall in the series, please also shoot us an email at events@Strong Network. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Leila. I was about to mention this is a work in progress. So we have a new series coming up. It's something we want to evolve. Because many of these topics here, they can be matured, they can be evolved, and there's always things to add. And also it goes with along with the progress we're making on the platform by supporting the different features, functionality, but it's also something that we want to evolve in this. Also I'm been working on is a series of articles that will be attached to each of these topics, and we'll publish these articles on our blog. We have this available on the website, and that gives you the complete narrative to any of these presentations. But I think also it explains also what the capability of the platform that we're providing, and also what we want to achieve in terms of technical roadmap and also market roadmap. So, as Leila was saying, this is the one today is about achieving regulatory security compliance. And so the specific example we give you today is about achieving compliance with risk controls as defined in ISO 27001. So this is the appendix. It's also, 20002 also is basically some of these implementations, but like the definition of this risk controls is really initially in the appendix of 20001. I think it's often something that is completely obscure or not really clear, to put it in a better light, to engineers, is that what does that mean to be in compliance with some of these things? Because actually the scope of the requirements, the scope of this standard is that it's broader than just technical aspects. It's also about like the way companies manage, also from a security perspective. different roles in the company. So it could be misunderstood sometimes because when you think of 2001, you might not realize that it really touches on many aspects of running a company. Just to put a bit of the background for this presentation, so this takes place on a platform that we've been developing here at Scrum Network that provides online containers for development, and this is replacing basically virtual machines. If you're aware of what containers are, it's basically the virtual processes, and it's actually much lighter than virtual machines. It's something that starts much quicker. It is accessible also in a much leaner way, so that you don't need actually powerful laptops to access your virtual environments. Something that can be done from very small lightweight machines, and it's something that really benefits a lot companies, especially in a reduction of IT costs, improvements of secure infrastructure, provisioning, and especially now we'll see that actually allows you to achieve compliance with the risk controls across several standards, and today we'll talk about ISO 27001. But the goal here of the platform is it benefits here. Basically, it takes place in the DevOps process. Whether you have a DevOps process or not, it benefits here the coding stage of any development process, whether it's DevOps or not. But here I took the example of DevOps, and the goal here to provision a secure environments that basically the developer will be able to access and create code in it. And then there will be benefits in doing this, not only in terms of swiftness and efficiency, but also in security. And I'll mention some of these ones today. What do we need secure development environments? Because this is just a few of the latest issues that transpired from the recent headlines and companies that being hacked and from their source code or data and something like that. A lot of information, a lot of credentials being leaked, and this is something that is difficult to keep under control because of, first of all, the diversity of a workforce that is involved in code development. This is something that involves people that could be at completely different locations and also working in different conditions. And this is something that is hard to deal with, especially companies that have a hard time to keep track, and we call this governance of such a distributed process. So this is why leaks and theft happens often, unfortunately. We have just 4 here, but you prepare new charts like with the, I think they have like about over 30 for the last 6 months or so. And it's all big companies, right? So it's not the problem that only happens at scale. It's a problem that obviously happens also for small companies, but it's highly underreported. It's something that's that basically affects us all. And the goal here, at least at Scrum Network, is to provide infrastructure that is really lean and that provides secure environments, without incurring the cost of basically some more archaic solutions such as desktop as a service or VDI. We provide this. We actually had just step in the past. We had actually here exactly within about 2 weeks ago, but I talked about more efficient, secure alternative to VDI, and that solution for developers. So it's something also that takes place exactly. It's actually what the platform provides here. But today I'll talk about implementing risk controls. So what are risk controls in ISO 27001 information security standard? I know if the engineers in the audience, that might sound boring at the beginning, but I guarantee it's actually not that boring. It's actually cool. I'm going to show you some of these things at the end. They're really interesting, and the way basically this comes into implemented in the tool, it's actually quite stuff. But this is not written by lawyers at all. This is written by information security specialists. This is very important to understand. This is written by security guys, for security-minded guys. And there's many parts to it, but like in ISO 27001, there's really, distinctly 2 parts. The first one addresses the way the company is organized, which I'm not going to discuss here. And this is, around okay, how should you run the company in terms of processes, and what should be the roles in your company, what people should be concerned about, and so on. And then there's the appendix. And the appendix is the one basically you see on your screen. And it's a bunch of management guidelines of security controls that need to be implemented across the company. And what happens basically is that initially the company needs to abide with the with the managerial part of the standard, which is the one I haven't pictured here, and they need also to show for each subsequent year to the assessor, who's basically the person who comes to the company to say how good your compliance is. The assessor will come and check your maturity with these risk controls, every year, and you have to show improvement in this maturity. So basically, what you need to do is to implement these requirements in your infrastructure. It could be in the way you do things, the tools you need to adopt, the information you need to capture, and so on. Things you need to process, and so on. And here, there are actually 14 categories here, from A5 to A18, and here, each of these are really categories, because inside there will be like perhaps 8 to 10 sub requirements, but there's quite some work. So it's not like there's only like 14 things to abide with and then we're done. Actually, it's quite a document. You will see that document has in total over 100 requirements, and basically what we need to do for each of the requirements, there was going to be a definition, and you need to explain how you implement these requirements inside your company. So let's take simple examples. And here also, I'm still at the level of categories. I'm not going to go into specific things at level of categories. So two examples of risk controls categories here. And they all, in general, they all attach to different aspects of the information security. And I mentioned before that companies do show maturity across all of them. So let's take, for instance, operation security. And I took here two, distinct examples here, but like for one of them here, you need to ensure that operation procedure responsibility, the objective of this one here is to ensure correct and secure operations information processing facility. So this is really abstract. I wanted to show basically two different aspects of it, because here, then you will get more details about what to do, because there's going to be 8.12.1.1. But this is the category. So don't expect people to say, hey, how do I abide with that stuff? Like, because that's really much abstract. But then you will have a list of specific points in this category that you need to abide with. And then you say, this would need to be implemented. And then you have the other one here, which I like, is protection from malware. So this is also, it takes place into, like a specific context. And then there's the one here that I find really interesting here, because it's about suppliers. And what I find interesting is basically lots of companies today, they outsource code development, or they work with suppliers, which you provide basically development teams, right? And there's really a bunch of interesting things that you can implement to make these supply relationships safe, and especially secure the information. And many of the information you might have to share with the suppliers might be actually regulated. So it means you have, if you leak this information, you might end up with a huge, significant fine from authorities, for instance, right? So this is something also that here, so we have to protect the organizational valuable assets here, accessible or affected by suppliers here. And then you have to have some kind of agreed level of information security service delivery. So there's a really, it could be really diverse, right? There's really a bunch of these requirements that will affect the way you work within your company, but also how you work with other companies which supply services services to you, right? So this is thing. So it shows you what it can span. And one of the interesting things here is that I think suppliers, this is being in the news lately, and the headlines that suppliers relationship really a boon for attackers, because this is the way basically to attack large companies, is to go to their suppliers. So this way, this way is really something that is a high interest for large companies, and this is also something that I think is interesting when you put into practice a platform like ours. You need to be aware that this is really something that can be significant. You bring significant value to your customers if this is something that is baked into the platform that is provided by the platform. So how do we deal? So now we have these requirements. We have this. Okay, I know that my company needs to achieve some type of security controls. Need to implement these security controls. Where do I start? So first of all, is something called the scope of applicability, which is very important because you cannot really deal with 27,001 without understanding what the SOA, scope of applicability, is. But it really means something simple. It means which is the process that is targeted by this standard, right? By this risk controls. Because you have to say, okay, the scope is here, which is the information that is basically needs to be protected. So in this case, in the case of Storm Network, we provide a platform for code development, right? So the code development platform will serve developers, and developers will create assets for the company, and the company will be able to govern the workforce thanks to the platform. So we need to understand what is the scope of information security, and this is the one here, the one that applies to application development. So the scope is application development, and this is from there we actually understand which one is the information to protect, right? So the first, if you need to implement 2001 in your company, then you need first to choose the scope for implementation, right? And that sounds, obvious once you know it, but before people think, oh, that applies everywhere, that could be really cumbersome, right? So yeah, you need first the assessor will come and we work we check your compliance with these requirements within a scope of applicability. In this case, for us, it's application development, because when we provide the platform to customers, they will use this for development, and it will bring them compliance with these risk controls that we implement with the platform in the scope of this process. So the effect of buying a platform, using a platform, will obviously not give you compliance for any back office process or something like that. It will give you compliance with code development process. So here we need to look at what's happening in that code development process. So developers, they will, input data. They will also output data from the platform. So basically, think of it, they might download information locally to the laptop, or they might upload information to the laptop, or they may just type information, right? Because obviously they're going to type code, and this is what this little logo here. Then the code actually will move to some code repository, which is the way to manage code. This is the way basically to keep track of the asset that be created by the developers. And this is, actually access to credentials. So we have this little key here, I showed here. The access to credentials, and that will provide you, entry ingress to that repository to put your code. And then you have also information that will actually be here conveyed to what we call the CI/CD pipeline, which is the part of which is a bunch of, basically in practice, a bunch of web applications that will be used to produce applications from this code, right? So basically, you have code that is created here. That this code will be here built, tested in order to create application. This application will be deployed and put in operation. So this is what's pictured here on the left-hand side. And this is the scope, right? So this is what the information that we need to protect. This is the operation that we need to protect. This is the scope of applicability. So we need to protect source code, credentials, token, cryptographic keys, development data such as text, binary, images, so everything that person the developer needs to do. And what we can do, for instance, well, you see this arrow here going down out. So actually, what we might really do to prevent the developer to download any data locally on this computer, or to upload any data locally on this computer. This is to the choice of the company, but this is something that is to consider in order to. But this is the scope. So once we have the scope, we can now ask ourselves, okay, so we did something very special with the platform here. This is the platform, you know, that we provide, and that we actually put containers online. So if you're sorry if you're not totally comfortable with what a container is, but a container is just the development environment. If you're interested in all the details about this thing, actually I gave this in the webinar last week. I explained what containers were in detail and as for how they were used across DevOps. I'm not going to go back to this here. What I just want to explain here is that we actually, by using the Strong Network platform, what we do, we move development environments, which is this little boat here, which is in practice a container. That's why it's represented like this, a little boat with it's like it's a whale actually with some type of containers on top of it. The logo of Docker. So basically which is one of the container providers, which pretty much everybody uses. That's why we have that thing almost by default. So instead of basically using containers locally here and all the environment here locally, I think what we do with the platform is that we actually put the container online. So which is really interesting, because by doing this, you basically separate now the local device and the local storage, what's happening here in this device, with the development environment that is used for programming, right? So think of it like we moved all the code, we move all the assets created by the developer, instead of having these assets here locally on the computer, which then there's only one thing here. There's no way to dissociate this from the local device and the local storage and all those things. What we did, we actually put that thing online, and this is the platform that we provide. And then now, you know, instead of coding locally, what happened is that the developer will code online. Right? So basically, but for him, it's actually the experience is the same, which is very important to notice this. I mean, it's not something that would change any shape or form the way she works on producing assets for the company. It's just transparent. But what happened is that we actually moved that little environment from the local device to an online storage. But actually, for the developer, this is the same, right? She doesn't see any difference on the way the activities are carried on. But the good thing is that this operation, that to put going from a local environment to online environment, is that, well, now things are very different, because now what happened is that because this is online and this is just one computer, imagine there will be 10 of them next to each other. All the environments are online. So now we can see what's happening. So we can see two things. We can see now what are the code files, development data that is actually produced, and we can see this in real time, because we can actually see what person is producing in real time. We can see all the development activity, you know, being carried on as, you know, as we speak. We could see, you know, keystrokes. We could see like produce activity, I think, which is, you know, very useful. And this is all work activity. What we can see, it will be any type of operations of this user here, any type of operation she will do outside the scope of this work environment. The work environment here is simply what is referred to as the IDE. Basically, is the environment where the person codes, and she will basically code in that environment. And as long as she's in that environment, this will be visible, which is perfectly decent, because, you know, it's basically a work activity. But anything that happens outside that environment, well, in our case, we also have a secure browser, but I don't want to go too much into detail for that. But here what happens outside. So actually, privacy is kind of conserved, right? Because you know, any kind of browsing that would happen outside the context of the idea and the work here won't be visible, but everything that happens in context of the work here. But in that case, it's perfect, because for us, what we want to ensure is compliance with risk controls in the scope of the work that is carried on by the company, in the scope of producing assets through code development, right? So this is something. So see, the effect I put is the effect of that visibility when putting containers online is that now the containers online, that development environments are online. Now you can see what's happening. You don't need basically to have what is referred to as an agent or kind of spyware that will be on that local computer. You don't need that thing anymore. Actually, without installing anything, you will see what's happening. And this is kind of the magical thing by bringing this development environment online. So this is what this was the premise for visibility. But now let's look at the risk controls here. So how's that work, right? So we have risk controls, but actually the good news is that they're not all attached to DevOps, right? Some of this risk control here will be completely, unrelated to code development. So even so we know that our SOA, and remember that means scope of applicability, is really the code development process. We also need to select which of these risk controls are attached to DevOps or code development in our case, right? And we see when we did a review of the specification, actually we have like 58 controls that are covered here by the platforms. We implement 58 controls and we don't implement 56 controls, and we explain why we don't implement the 56 because actually it's not related to DevOps. Think, for instance, like some of the risk controls is like physical security. Is like you have to secure access to a room, for instance, in your company, right? And make sure that people have access, proper access, can access the room. But that's not going to be solved by our platform, right? Obviously, it's not something that's going to be solved by the platform that we provide to customers. In that case, we don't cover that requirement here. But this is something. So we first have to account for only the risk control that needs to be covered in the case of code development process. I give an example. This is the document that we provide for coverage. This is a summary of what's happening. So what we do is say, okay, this is the domain. So I mentioned this categories and so on. So we have actually 3 levels: the categories, domain, and security objective. And here, this is what the standards say you should do. You should comply with, and this is how we do it. So I put this platform coverage. So for each of these requirements, we explain, oh, this is how we do it. This is how we do it, and so on, right? Like for instance, let's take this one. Information security responsibilities. So all information security responsibility needs to be defined, allocated. Information security responsibility can be general, protect, and specific, and so on. And in the scope of the platform, so the SOA applies to that. So we need to consider roles in the development process. That will be manager, that will be developers, that will be project owners, that could be just reviewers, that could be security analysts, and so on. And all these people here, there will be their role, and access control will be defined by what is called a role-based access control model. So this is what we provide on the platform. And this is how basically using that mechanism, which is called RBAC mechanism, we can actually comply with this thing because we have a way to segregate between different roles and responsibilities as here defined and explained by the standards. So this is a small example of how we do things. But there's a whole document like this. So we have basically 58 of these lines here, and we explain this in document. And always for the one that we don't comply, we explain also why we didn't comply and what is not relevant for the platform. So let me give you a few examples. And then we can open it for questions. But first, I want to give you a quick example. So these are some of these requirements that we can basically. And I took the one I selected here were perhaps though a few that were interesting because I think from the platform perspective, it's not completely clear how you would do this. But first of all, you need to think of first thing, what is the scope of applicability? So it's code development. So always put, when you read that requirements, put this in the scope of applicability. So think of it, how does apply to code development? And this is the case here, it's about protecting against malware from local devices. We can protect code and data from contamination by malware by monitoring any data upload into the container from local devices. This is the solution that we provide. But the first time you see this requirement, you have first to imagine, okay, how does that impact my developer? And this is where you decide first. Remember that this is where you decide where it applies or not, right? Because, I mean, some will be completely obvious. Like, I want to secure access to my room card or something like that, but it's not applied to the platform. So I'm not going to solve that issue with the platform, right? So first you read that thing here. If that applies, then you say, okay, how can we implement this here? So I'll give you this example here. So this is really part of the write-up of this requirements, control against malware, detection, prevention, recovery, controls. to protect against malware must be implemented and combined with the appropriate user awareness and so on. So, and this is something that I can explain to you why there's different level of maturity, because there's multiple ways basically. So you have to read that stuff and then to interpret it and to say how well do we do, are we complying with this thing? And this is where the assessor opinion is going to come into play, right? She's going to say, okay, well, you apply your show maturity, or like, and usually what they do is that they have like 4 levels of maturity. This like, you know, and basically from our knowledge about the top about the domain and you know the you know what typically what is the best practice in the industry, she'll be able to say that okay, you comply here maturity A1 to 4 here. But obviously the goal of the platform here is to provide maximum maturity, so we want to maximize the benefits on the customers. So basically in that case we want to make sure that you know, compliance is maximized, right? So here, so what we do here is that so I explained this to you before, that one of the cool things with putting containers online is that you basically you dissociate the you know, local information, the information that is basically present on the local hardware here, like the storage, to the one that is online on the development environment. So you can't see really what's happening here, but what is the relationship is that what typically the user, the developer here might be able to do is to upload information. So you can say, okay, for instance, why would they do that? Well, for instance, like they say, I'm actually coding an image processing algorithm, right? And I need an image. So basically I need to, I need to read the local image, and then I need basically to process that image. So in that case, I would have to bring somehow this image into my container, because this is where my algorithm is running, and I will read that image and process it, right? So in that case, what happens is that I would have to upload that image. So what can you do to comply with that control? It is every time information is uploaded inside the container, then you would have to scan it. You have to check there's no malware in there. So you think of this type of you know, scanning process. And what we do here is that if the scan shows that it's actually benign, there's actually no issue with the information that was uploaded there, you can actually you know, have it in the container, or you can block it, right? So typically what we do is that we use an external API that will provide scanning functionality, like an antivirus, right? And it will scan the content, and then once this content has been approved there. And what we would do also here, you know, to make sure that this is well documented, is that every time somebody uploads information into the container, is being basically audited. So there's an event that was created and that was reported in the log, right? So this will go into the log, and this will, you know, come like as a you know, an event in the log, and we know when people upload things, and we know actually scanning was successful, right? So this is, so I find that was kind of one of the cool controls that we have here in the information. So let's take another one. So this is one of the tricky ones, because this is something that plagues really most of the companies that I know, is that when somebody leaves the company, a developer, then they make sure they don't have access to anything anymore. And it is easier said than done, because, well, you know, companies have a lot of applications, a lot of things, especially, you know, in code development, they will basically have access and needed to many you know, repositories for data that contains, you know, company data, right? So this is something that also something should be really automated as much as possible, right? But the issue is that especially in the case where you don't have a platform like ours, like you may have separate access to many different applications, and there's no one source of control for all the keys, all the credentials, all the tokens, all the information that is needed to access all these resources, right? So this is basically where our platform plays, I think, a significant role, because any information that will be needed by development from their environment here, then developer is actually never aware of the real credentials, because the credentials are owned by the company, right? So basically, the platform will control all the keys, and by keys I mean really all the credentials of the organization, and the basically any type of access needed to code data services, or it could be any TCP/SH or HTTPS services, will be here controlled by the organization, and the keys owned by the organization. So that's why I think this is one of the key mechanisms for the organization. But the good thing is that one of the basically key benefits of such a mechanism here is that when you remove a user from project, right, which is the function in the platform, then all the basically automatically all access to everything that that person would have access to are automatically revoked, right? So this is something that so you don't have to worry about, oh, okay, now I have to go through all this again, because what people have actually in practice in the admin side of IT, they will have a list of all the applications that person had access to, and might have to revoke some of them manually and so on. This has been mitigated with the use of single sign-on, because you basically put some type of layer between access and an application that that person has access to. But single sign-on is really exists for web applications and not a data resource for development. It's where basically the platform is filling a big gap, is that we provide that single sign-on for data resources for development, and this is protecting basically access to all these things. So that's such that the developer is not able to access this when basically she's out of the company and so on. So how does that look like here? This is like look at the platform, but I'm actually here removing myself from the project here. So you can just go. This is my access and my role here as a developer, and I can just go here, remove from project here, and that's it. In just one operation, then everything will be removed. So I think that's kind of very handy, I think. But believe it or not, I mean, this is really some requirements. It is something that actually people seeking for compliance with ISO, they kind of joke about it. This is one of the trickiest one because of the complexity of today's IT infrastructure and the amount of changes that we require when we do somebody's departing the company. Okay, another one here, and this is labeling information and assets across multiple resources. So this is one of the issues that the standards in many, I'm showing here that example because in one feature will actually comply with multiple. So you don't have to be one-to-one, right? It's not that you have to implement one mechanism for each requirement. Might be necessary in some cases, but like in some other cases, you can actually kill multiple birds with one single stone. In that case here, the birds are 822 and 931. And here, this is actually dealing with very similar mechanisms. So if you can label your source of information, and it's something that you can use them, to rule like access to them. You can label things as confidential, non-confidential. It is very important because across company, this is ties back actually to the one I gave before about the roles. I gave that small example here about the roles here. So this is all intertwined in the sense that you would have basically to understand who can access what, you might have to put labels on it. And the difficulty here is that since you have multiple different resources, it will come from different providers. Like you access code through GitHub, for instance, GitLab, or you access data to AWS S3 buckets, and you access services, you have your own services and so on. So it is not one way to, there's not actually a practical way to put labels on them, right? An easy way, unless basically you have a platform like this, like the one we have, and you will federate access to these resources from because this is what people require with each development, and we have a way busy to label those resources. Think of this like a bunch of resources. The platform will come on top as a way to label these resources, and it's actually a very handy mechanism because now you can actually control access to this resource, and you can label this for the for the purpose of understanding where is what, right? So and then just by that simple mechanism, labeling mechanism, you can comply with actually, I just put 2 here, but they can comply with actually many others. So that's the interesting aspect of it. All right, one more, and then I'll open it for questions. I can leave like for about 10 minutes for questions, but this is here. I think this is one of the closest ones I kept for the end, because the first time I looked at this requirement, I was like, wow, yeah, well, you're gonna comply with something like that, right? Especially I was thinking, putting myself in the shoes of our customer and said like, how do you comply with something like this? So look at this one. Capacity management. Also, it's interesting that you have this into information security standard, because it's not completely obvious that this is something that, well, actually, somehow like capacity management is attached to information security, even loosely, but I think it makes sense. But here, the use of resources must be monitored, tuned, and projection made of future capacity requirements to ensure the requirement system performance to meet the business objectives. Wow, this is like, which resource are we talking about? So here, in the case of code development, so this is a cool stuff, right? Because this is really like how much capacity you need to develop your code, how much like infrastructure you need to that, how much CPUs and stuff like that, right? So imagine this, like, how can you have like, uh, you know, a fair consumption, or you can actually just say, okay, may just say how many laptops I have to buy for my team, and I can't for all these laptops. Say, okay, I need that amount of laptops for my team. Yeah, but this is really still, right? It's just like a very, I would say poor man's metric on how much capacity you need to run your process. But with the really cool aspect of the cloud is that now, because we moved our development environment in the cloud, we also move compute in the cloud, because every time some compilation happens of the code, that happens here in the cloud. So we use actually the power of these virtual CPUs of the cloud provider here to do all this work, right? So now that we have access to this, then we can account for it. We can account very precisely. This is basically this is our cluster. Basically, every day when our developers come to work, they acquire processors virtually, automatically on their workspaces here. And you can see we go like to about 45 CPUs every day. Going down, this is the evening, and this is the weekend here. You see, like sometimes something happens in the weekend, but no much work happens during the weekend, obviously, and so on. So here we can actually really have an amazing compliance with that requirements, and we can actually plan for capacity. We know how much capacity we need, and this is something actually one of our main customers, namely here Broadcom, ask us for management of resources, because this is something that is very important to them, because this is something we can really save a lot of cost in the company, and this is something that basically that will be completely opaque if you use DAS or VDIs and stuff like that, because it's something you really don't have access to. And but using the lightweight containers, this type of technology, like the one we developed here, give you a really good accounting of what you need, and prediction of what you will need, and also cost control on that. So, and then believe me, one of the fantastic feedback we get from developers is that, well, they just wish at the end of the month the bill of DAS or VDI is not too expensive, because this is really something difficult to control, especially with developers have some leeway in choosing what they want to use and so on. In that case, it's actually really easy to control cost, and to get some type of accountability for that. So that's it. So that was like some examples of requirements. We have 58 to go, to 54, because we did 4 of them, but I'm not obviously going to bore you with all these things. But yeah, this is it. And I would just want to show you a few examples how we implement this kind of risk controls with the platform. So that's it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for the examples. It's quite a practical way to exemplify. We actually have a couple questions from our participants today, so I'm just going to get started with the first one. Yep. First question is it possible to also track custom risk controls outside of the ones provided by the platform?
Sorry, to track what? I couldn't hear it. So
Custom risk controls.
Custom
on top of the ones that you're talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. Yeah, because actually, but this is something that we do as a service, right? Typically, I was mentioning here for that cost control. I mean, Broadcom just ask us a new functionality for this. Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite easy to implement because it's one of the key aspects is this visibility that you gain by putting this environment. So think of it, you get full visibility of everything that happens in everybody's computer in the scope of the work, right? Not in the rest that in the user own machine. You won't get to know what happens outside the scope of the work because it's only. So it's actually easy to implement risk control. So we're thinking of, for instance, risk control around HIPAA and this type of requirements in medical space. I mean, like, so yeah, definitely easy to implement new risk control. So I mean, just send us the definition. I can explain to you. And some actually, one of the good things, some of things might actually be already implemented because just because of some of the security mechanisms. So sometimes you don't need to implement anything. Just look at what you need and see whether or not already the platform fulfill these requirements, and then it could be a done deal.
Yeah, so they're going to be overlaps as well with
Yeah,
other
exactly. There's going to be overlap. Yeah,
standards.
because
Yeah.
actually, that's a good point because this risk controls, there's a lot of overlap across standards. So yeah, some of
Yeah.
them are completely implemented already.
That actually kind of goes with the second question, which is, do you comply or plan to comply with other information security
Yeah,
standards?
well, absolutely. There's what you know. There's also something that is this interesting thing because this is something that was promoted recently by an ordinance of the White House and in the U.S. and is the use of this secure code development process. And this is something that really interests me because they have a bunch of requirements that are super interesting that could be really easily implemented. I looked at some of them really were already in the platform, but some can be implemented. But that's, yeah, this is something we have on the roadmap. And again, there's value overlap. But so for the industry that we address now, which is, we obviously working a lot with banking, beside information technology companies, we're banking and insurances. So yeah, there's something we're actually looking for. And we do also some custom work for customers, including also something I didn't mention, reporting dashboards, because something I didn't talk about this thing today, but getting like automated reporting to dashboards of report generation for compliance, something we do.
Yeah, you're answering the next question as well here, because you talked about visibility, and that question also relates to visualizing compliance. How easy is it possible? Yeah, to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's very easy because so what we do is either so we have dashboards for ISO, but we can do also custom dashboards. So it can be choose to real-time dashboards because some of these controls might be actually the assessment might be available in real time. Some others might be different condition has to be done on data that was acquired, for instance, over a certain amount of time, so it can be generated after that. But yes, this is typically, so expect to have all these controls into fancy dashboards and reports, right? So we have actually some of them already, but I don't want to take too much time for that. But yes, actually, so there's the platform. Let me switch also to my favorite theme here. And yeah, so we have the inside, we have the audit dashboard, we have the inside, we have this, I mentioned this resource usage I was showing before. So this is basically the thing I was mentioning there for cost control. And we have like this thing, going out like every day, so on. Project work activity breakdown on what people do, and audit, we have real-time audit here for the security and so on. So this is typically the dashboard that you get, and the report generation. We have also a way to report I'm security officer on the platform, so I can generate reports from that as well. Yeah.
Awesome, great. And I think we have one more question. It is, does this can this apply beyond code development into the entire DevOps cycle?
Okay. Yeah. So you stay in DevOps. Yeah, absolutely. No. Oh, cool. Because I was thinking of outside code. Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is this is an important point here. Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the visibility you will get also into it could be into testing, into build. For instance, what we do, one of the dashboard I just showed now actually reports information that was actually inside GitHub, and other tools because you want to correlate the diverse source of information for compliance. And like for instance, one of the things that a customer asked us, they were interested in basically having a better accountability in the duration of a task, because people put in Jira the amount of time it took to achieve a task, but this can be arbitrary at some time. It can be unaudited. So what people want to do is, so actually what we do is that we take multiple metrics from different tools. One of them is GitHub and GitLab or Bitbucket, because it's exactly the same thing. Looking at the time for the pull request and the commits and the merge, and basically correlate this with the amount of time spent on the workspaces, and have a more fair assessment of the time it took to that task. And this is like the graph I showed you before. So some of these things, yeah, they could be integrated across multiple tools. This is actually the advantage that when you connect to tools across the lifecycle, the DevOps lifecycle, you can actually get this what is referred to as composite information, and we can basically get insights that is completely impossible to get from a single tool. But it comes to light when you can integrate information across multiple tools. Yes. For instance, also we have a special role on the platform, which is security officer. This one I have access to special metrics for that. But you can create audit roles that purely people have access. They don't really code development, and when we come to the platform, they only have access to auditing information, for instance. Because this is the advantage of the RBAC model I mentioned before, is that basically you can actually go and create specific roles here that will only get access. Yeah, that we only have access to specific roles. You can client audits, project owner, tech lead, and so on. But basically, you can create specific roles that only have access to dashboards and information they need for auditing, for instance. Yeah, so it applies also to non-developers, absolutely.
Yeah. Non-developers.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That covers our questions for today.
Great.
So again, we'll if there's any more questions, again, email us, events@strongnetwork, and we can answer those directly. Otherwise, we don't have the next one to offer for next week. But as I said at the beginning, more will come soon. So we'll keep you posted. And you will get the recording of this webinar, obviously, as soon as it's available.
Okay.
And thanks, Laurent. Right. Thanks for the presentation.
Thanks, Leila.
Cool.
And thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.